Let's talk about the LA Kings once again and talk about the Calder discussion. Because when it comes to the Calder Trophy, which is the NHL's award for Rookie of the Year as voted by the Professional Hockey Writers Association, there are a few names on the LA Kings that you can go ahead and make a pretty good argument for as to whether or not they should, could, or would win the Calder. Quinton Byfield is the guy that pops up into many fans' minds, but you have a few other guys in there too. There are some other prospects that could make a big jump, and who could surprise. Who really knows if Arthur Kaliyev is guaranteed to stick around in Ontario, or if it's guaranteed that Alex Turcotte is not going to make the team. There are a whole bunch of guys and a whole bunch of really good prospects that could make a good impact, but when it comes to the Calder in particular, there's one name that's been slithering into the conversation as a potential underdog Calder candidate from the LA Kings organization. In this video, we'll be discussing, do I agree with the sentiment? Do I think he could win the Calder? Is he all that he's hyped up to be? Well, before we get into any of that, let's discuss who he is. He, my friend, is Vladimir Tkachyov. Now, this is a name that you might be somewhat familiar with if you're a fan of the Edmonton Oilers. He signed a contract back in Edmonton in 2014. That contract signing back then was actually rejected because he went undrafted and he hadn't played a full season in North America, so boo-hoo Edmonton, I guess. However, back when he signed that contract, his name was actually spelled differently. It was spelled Tkachev instead. However, it's a different spelling today, mostly because the Russian alphabet, if you translate it into Latin typeface, it isn't directly the same. That's why you have some names like Evgeny is spelled sometimes E-V-G-N-I. Other times it's spelled with a Y at the beginning. It's not really the same. So this time around, Vladimir Tkachyov is spelling his name Vladimir Tkachyov, which is a lot more accurate as to how the Russian guys in the KHL broadcast pronounce his name, but the contract is going to have a $925,000 cap hit and a base salary of $832,500 for 1 year. Tkachyov is heading over to the LA Kings, and if you take a look at the profile, it's pretty interesting right here. He's an October 1995 born player, which means that he is quite literally just under a month's eligible for the Calder. This is the eligibility right here on the NHL's website. We're going to skip the first sentence because it's pretty much just saying, hey, if you've played a lot of games in the professional leagues before, you can't win. However, it's kind of capped because the KHL under this ruling is not actually counted, which is why Kaprizov and Panarin have won the Calder despite this ruling being in place. The big one, though, is the second sentence. Beginning in 1991, a player must not have attained his 26th birthday by September 15th of the season in which he is eligible. So you have to be 25 years old on September 15th before the year begins, and Tkachyov is turning 26 on October 5th. So had he been born 20 days earlier instead of October 5th on September 15th instead, he would have turned 26 on September 15th and he would not have been eligible for the Calder. So he is barely eligible, but hey, eligible is eligible. He'll have the same chance of winning as all the other guys in the rookie class of 2021-2022. Now, why exactly is he being pegged as a potential Calder winner? Well, because in his most recent season with SKA St. Petersburg in the KHL, he had 38 points in 45 games played, 11 goals, 27 assists, and in the postseason he was under a point per game, 11 games played, and 8 total points. He is a top KHL guy. And if you take a look at the KHL's overall point production in 2021, you can see that he was indeed out there as one of the top half of point producers in the KHL. I'm not going to go out there and make it seem like he's going to be Panarin or Kaprizov, though. Reason being is because his point production, while good, wasn't necessarily that of a pending star like a Kaprizov or a Panarin. Take a look at some of the guys who outproduced Tkachyov in the most recent season of KHL play. A lot of these guys were NHL tweeners and AHL stars. You can see that he was outscored in terms of points per game by Reed Boucher of Avangard Omsk, who had a .94 points per game compared to Tkachyov's .84. As you go up the list, you'll see a little bit more. Shane Prince was over here with a .94 points per game too. Remember Shane Prince? Yeah, that guy was a project for the Islanders all the way back then. Dmitry Oskin is over here as well as over a point per game. Ilya Kovalchuk is out here too. Marcus Granlund, of all people, is out here as one of the top point per game guys as well. Not to mention Yuri Lethera, Ryan Spooner, Vadim Shipachev, who had his chance in the NHL. Wasn't really given to him, to be honest, but he didn't really work out in the NHL either. So even though the rhetoric amongst LA fans is that this guy, Vladimir Tkachyov, could come over here and potentially be a Calder candidate, I'm personally not all too sure, mostly because the records of KHL point production in the past year do not really seem all too favorable if you want to go out there and say, yeah, Tkachyov was outscored by Marcus Granlund, by Mikko Lehtinen, by Shane Prince, Reed Boucher, and a few other guys. A lot of these players weren't even good enough to crack the NHL, so for Tkachev, there's a reason why the contract that was given to him was just $832,000 as a base salary. In fact, let's compare Tkachev to previous KHL guys who came over and became Calder winners too. Kirill Kaprizov's the most recent one because of course he is, and you can see right here, this is a list of U26 KHLers sorted by points per game with their ages also displayed in the timeline. Artemi Panarin, before stepping into the NHL, was at a 1.15 points per game as a 23-year-old. He had 62 points in 54 games played in 2014-15. The next season, he was a point per game in the NHL with Patrick Kane, and he won the Calder Trophy. Tkachev, on the other hand, is all the way down there at the 55th spot, as a .84 points per game with 38 points in 45 games played in his best statistical year at 25 years old. The closest Kirill Kaprizov season happened when Kaprizov was 19. He had 42 points in 49 games played, a .86 points per game in 2017. So, if you want to go out there and try to compare the Kaprizovs to the Tkachevs, Kaprizov literally outscored Tkachev's best season despite being 6 years younger at the time. Kaprizov then became better and better in the KHL. As time went on, he was fantastic, one of the best players in that entire league. And so in the NHL, he absolutely dominated, which is why he won the Calder this year. So, for Tkachev, I don't want to make it seem like I'm rooting against the guy. If he goes out there and he wins the Calder, fantastic. I would love to see a guy like that take over the reins of the best rookie in the league, especially because of the competition he would have to beat out in order to get that trophy. We've mentioned this before, but the Calder is pretty much at its core a point race, so even if you have an 18-year-old Connor McDavid going up against a 25-year-old Artemi Panarin, Panarin had more points, Panarin had the better season, and the Calder is not awarded to the most impactful rookie, it's awarded to the rookie that has the best season, which is why Panarin won in 2016. If Vladimir Tkachyov can go out there and get more points than Cole Perfetti with the Jets, then Trevor Zegras with the Ducks, then Cole Caulfield with the Habs, then be my guest, give this guy the Calder Trophy. However, based off of his KHL point production, I'm not really too sure if he can go out there and do what it is that a Cole Caulfield will do with Montreal. If we go over onto Byron Bader onto Twitter, he has himself some advanced analytics as to the projections of Tkachev, the draft +1, +2, +3 NHL E scores and whatever. You can see the numbers right here. It is kind of interesting to see his progression go upwards as his career has gone on. And if you take a look at the comparables based off of his full career so far, you have names that are pretty interesting right here. Logan Couture, Josh Bailey, Nick Ritchie, Alex Hemsky, and Pat Verbeek. Some of these guys are a lot better at producing than others, but these are still interesting names for sure. Just for comparison's sake, the draft year comparables were Olli Jokinen, Raffi Torres, Carl Soderberg, certainly some pretty respectable names at the time. Tkachev, if you go back to his draft year, which would have been the 2014 NHL Entry Draft, he was over a point per game in the MHL, had 2 games played in the KHL as an underage player, which is great, and was at 30 points in 20 games with the Moncton Wildcats in the QMJHL. So he had himself a pretty good stock. It's just the development curve was really different for this kind of player, eventually making himself over to Admiral Vladivostok in the KHL, Salavat Yuleev Ufa, and then SKA St. Petersburg. He's been improving year after year. It's just whether or not his improvement is good enough to be Calder-worthy in the NHL is unforeseen at the moment. So, for Tkachev heading over to the NHL, could he win the Calder? He's eligible. Is he going to be as good as Kaprizov? Most likely not. However, there is indeed a very interesting profile to take a look at with this kind of player over here. He is a right shot left wing who finished with a .84 point per game season with the SKA St. Petersburg team. He is no Kaprizov, but there are some similarities. Heavy in possession, good shooting percentage at 13.3%, and is really strong on his edges, which provides great agility for the 5'10 forward. So for the LA Kings, we'll see where he goes from here, if he gets a good role with the team, if he even makes the team in the first place, because I mean, look, some of the guys that outscored him in the KHL this season were AHL caliber guys in North America, so I'm going to be reserving my judgment, but I would love to be proven wrong for sure. Talk to me in the comments, though, Kings fans. What do you think you have on Tkachev? Do you see him winning the Calder, and do you see him making as big of an impact as he did in the KHL with your team this season? Talk to me in the comments what you think if you enjoyed this video. 99, and bye.